So we talked earlier about the response in the news to this. There was something from Chris Luxon, our Prime Minister. There was something from our Minister of Mental Health, and they have been disappointing. And you earlier commented about, is the government going to do anything, and when, if? So can we dig into that?
We can. So it's you can look up Politics Friday. Should the government intervene in Gloriavale? If you want to do a Google search, and we'll put it on our Cult Chat page as well. It was a Newstalk ZB discussion with John Macdonald, who invites politicians onto his show, and he had Duncan Webb from Labour, and he had Matt Doocey, who's the Minister of Mental Health, and Gloriavale became one of the topics of conversation for a couple of minutes. So let us play that to you and dissect his response.
Lawyer Brian Henry, who's been representing ex-members of the Gloriavale community, says the time has come, with the leader now a convicted sex offender, for the government to intervene and take over the running of the place. Duncan Webb, what's your view on that?
Look, I think there's an argument for it, right? When big organisations fail, the government does get power to appoint a statutory manager. Did it with South Canterbury Finance, it's done it before. And it's actually an organisation with a whole lot of vulnerable people, a whole lot of children, and it's not good. There's a lot of harm that occurs there. The Aero has said time and again that the school that's on site there is not delivering good educational outcomes for kids. I don't think it ever will or ever can. So I'm actually leaning towards Brian Henry's view here.
Right, so it's a roundabout way of saying, yes, the government should take over.
Well, it certainly should do more, and this government has stepped back.
Oh, well, hold on a minute.
No,
what did you guys do?
Well, two things, or many more than two things. We put together a cross-ministerial group to actually push things like the education, the social services, the health services going into Gloriavale, and to do more. The Aero report that's coming out is because we pushed for it, and it's been ongoing
That's all very well. And I'm sure we come up with other examples, but none of them have done anything to deal with the fact that there are kids living there being abused by some paedophiles.
Yeah, and the police actually had a task force which was constantly going in, and also not just going in kind of in a police way, but building relationships. Because one of the problems, and I went to the Decult conference here and heard about it from one of the victims. One of the problems is that the victims don't feel ready to speak out because of the huge power imbalance that goes on in that place. So the police were working hard. They were disestablished under this government.
Right, Matt Doocey, what is the government going to do?
Well, I think it's first to point out that Brian Henry hasn't called for Gloriavale to close.
He's asked for the government to take over.
I think his words were there was a group of law-abiding citizens living there. I am not of the same view as Duncan that the government should intervene in the sense of whether it's taking it over or maybe establishing a commissioner. But clearly, if there's concerns around young people, it should be reported to police.
Oh, man,
and
Weasel-words.
No.
Weasel-words. Don't come to us, ring the police. Actually, not weasel-words, it's BS.
No, I disagree. That is the society we live in. People have free choice to live in and associate.
What about the kids? The kids don't have free choice. I wasn't expecting such a lame response, mate.
Well, that's your definition. It's not mine. That is why we have the safeguarding of Aranga Tamariki. We have police. If people report criminal activity, as Duncan alluded to, there's multiple government agencies that intervene within their powers, and that's what we would expect. But if you are saying that
you blow me away.
Well, that's for your view, John. But if you're really saying that the answer is for the government to take an independent organisation, charity or entity over, I disagree. That is for the people of Gloriavale.
Charity. It's a coercive cult that causes harm to a lot of people. And there are innocent people there. I get it. And there are people that just want to live their life. But at its heart, it is rotten.
You're allowed your view, Duncan. I respect that. But I'll come back to my original point. Brian Henry, who's a lawyer prosecuting this, actually said he didn't agree with it being disbanded because there was enough law-abiding citizens wanting to live within that arrangement, and that should be respected. And that's the laws.
Even the Gloriavale Leaders Trust doesn't say it should be disbanded, but they do say that that it should be managed and that people should be freer to leave and free of the coercion and control that currently exists.
Absolutely. But ring the police. Talk to someone who's interested.
Oh, wow. It's hard to know where you start, but there's two words that sprung out. They have free choice.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that was a fast-paced conversation with a lot of emotion. And so to clarify to our listeners, there are three different people there. And one, Duncan Webb, was at the Decult conference, and he was the one saying, was he the one who was like, that's such a lame response?
That was John Macdonald.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
that was
interviewer.
John Macdonald. So he was the interviewer.
Yeah, Duncan was saying things like it's a coercive cult. Like he
That was
gets
very
it.
blunt language.
He gets it. Yes.
Yeah.
He was at the cult and he said
Yeah.
he had talked to a Gloriavale or had listened to a Gloriavale leaver. So he has heard that story and it's settled with him. So
But then, and so then it was Matt Doocey who said something about the free choice.
mhm.
Our Minister for Mental Health. I was just flabbergasted. So was half the nation. It was so ignorant, so
Do you have
naive.
that
Like
comment there? Can you go over that comment again, Liz? What exactly was the comment?
he said that people have free choice in these sorts of groups,
They
and
can
I
call
just
they can call the police or they can call
then they can call the
American.
police. I mean, I just wonder where he's been for the last few years. Has he been reading the news? Perhaps he needed to accept the invitation. He got to the DCOP conference and turned down. Perhaps he needed to accept the invitation when we went to Parliament last year, Lindy, Caz, and our delegation of us, and ran an event in Parliament and invited MPs like Matt Doocey to come along because he needs educating. There's a very, very embarrassing response from a Minister of Mental Health. Does he not realise that people who come out of cults or have been in cults are some of the most impacted people? So sitting in his portfolio, he has no idea about cultic influence and how it affects people's mental health. Doesn't he know how high the rates are of people who don't want to live anymore? He's that ignorant? Well, he needs educating. So I'm calling out to New Zealand now. Time to educate MP Matt Doocey to help him do his job properly.
I agree. Here.
He's going, they can, if there's a problem, they've got free choice and they can call the police. So like he's not even talking about the in the middle between shut them down and they can manage this themselves. If they've got a problem, they can call the police. I mean, like there's just that's two wildly polarized ends of the spectrum. And he's the Minister of Mental Health. He should understand the huge in the middle and have more to say than just defer to what other people have said.
Yes.
He's got nothing to say on it, really.
He had nothing to say, and I think it's very concerning because really, if there were to be any good, decent response in Gloriavale, it needs to involve the Minister of Mental Health, in my view.
Could I take about 90 seconds to inform Matt Doocey here? I wrote a little bit for the talk I gave 3 days ago to healthcare workers about bounded choice. And this is really essentially what we're talking about, bounded choice. The stark or limited options that people in groups have when they're in coercively controlling environments. And I wrote this little section with the support of Janja Lalich. She went over it and she made it a bit nicer. So this is me and Janja Lalich, who's the expert on bounded choices, little segment. Okay, so Matt Doocey, if you're listening, this is what it is. Indoctrination into a cult results in a state of mind that Dr. Janja Lalich calls bounded choice. Once a member is fully indoctrinated, they will have fully incorporated the beliefs and behaviours required of them. In a sense, they become a microcosm of the cult itself. When faced with a decision, they know there is only one decision to make. They will choose what the cult requires of them, or else faced death, figuratively or literally. At this point, not only their worldview, but their entire sense of morality becomes the immorality of the cult leader. Ultimately, the indoctrination process produces a person who lacks the necessary ingredients for free or uncoerced decision-making in their or their children's best interests.
Boom.
Matt Doocey, that is the situation that these people are dealing with when they have to make a choice for their children's best interests. You need to understand this.
That is the so-called choice that they have, a very bounded.
So-called inverted commas, a bounded or stark or impossible or limited or caged choice.
Dr. Norris in the Employment Court, she wrote about high-cost groups, and she said people in these groups don't actually get on stage one of the decision-making step. Can't even get to step one of the decision-making process.
Wow.
I'll never forget that. Really interesting. I might just have to take that wonderful quote and send it off to some other government departments who could do with reading that right now. So look, there we go. We're in an interesting...
Dr. Lalich, thank you for helping me write that little section.